Dr. Quintin Hunt is an associate professor in the School of Family Life here at BYU. He received his undergraduate degree in Marriage, Family, and Human Development from BYU in 2011, then received his graduate degree in Marriage and Family Therapy at the University of Las Vegas in 2013. In 2018, he received his PhD in Couple and Family Therapy at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus and did his postdoc at Drexel University in Philadelphia. At Drexel, he worked on a large randomized cultural trial with suicidal adolescents, which helped to inform his line of research of understanding and preventing those people with indicated risk for suicide. Ms. Julia Bernards, also of the School of Family Life here at BYU, received her bachelor's degree from BYU in 2000. She received her MS in Marriage and Family Therapy from BYU in 2017 and is currently working on her PhD. In 2019, her oldest child came out as transgender, which led her to become interested in researching LGBTQ+ issues and how to help guide parents of queer children. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she and her husband have 4 children. Together, their research can and has helped parents form a safe space for their transgender children. The title of this colloquium presentation is Transitions and Transformations, Parents' Process of Accepting a Transgender Child. Please join me in welcoming them today.
Oh, thank you. And I need to stand here for the Zoom, is that right? Just to stay here? Okay. Well, welcome. I'm glad to get to speak to you guys today on a topic and research that is really important to me and has been a process, as you heard from that introduction, that's personal as well as professional. So the first thing I want to talk about is just that being trans, and you can see the asterisk there. In this research, we're looking not only at trans folks, but also people who are gender nonconforming or gender creative in a number of ways, like non-binary or bigender, things like that. But given our society, it's not particularly easy. Research indicates that about 1 in 3 transgender youth will attempt suicide. They have much higher rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, like 2 to 3 times their peers. And also they experience a lot of victimization and substance use, and it's not easy. The last 10 years or so, this issue and experience of trans people has come more to light, and so we're hoping that starts to change some, but at this point it is continuing to be a difficult thing. Also because of minority issues, minority stress, just being part of a marginalized society has real impacts on people's health. So in terms of the church, and we're doing this research with trans folks and their families who are either members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or who have been affiliated. In the church, we also are trying to make some progress. M. Russell Ballard at a question and answer here at BYU in 2017 said, "We need to listen to and understand what our LGBT brothers and sisters are feeling and experiencing. Certainly, we must do better than we have done in the past so that all members feel they have a spiritual home where their brothers and sisters love them." And for parents, it's not only a spiritual home, which is what the church would offer, but a physical home. It's hard for a lot of parents when a child comes out as trans or gender diverse, and a lot of kids find that they don't have a home at all anymore. Let's see, there we go. So another thing that was said, and this is, I don't know if any of you are aware, but on the church website now, under the Life Help section, there are a section for transgender and a section for, I don't know if they call it same-sex attracted or gay at this point. Anyway, section for both of those. And in that section, it talks about what do we as members of the church do when we have friends or family members who identify this way. It says like show Christ-like love and talks about that. So on one hand, from the church, we are starting to have some more compassion and support. On the other hand, there's still some real challenges. This is just a brief statistic. What we think from research is that about 0.05% or 0.5, I don't know, anyway, 0.5, okay. Anyway, it's about 1 in 200 people that identify as trans or gender diverse, which means there's probably someone in every congregation, in every ward, maybe multiple people. So this is a growing issue in the church. And we also know, well, I don't know what you guys know, but in 2020, the new handbook came out, and there was a section about transgender folks and how we deal with that. And there was both an encouragement to love, but also a clear statement that the church does not support transitioning. That's hard for people. There have been recent events at BYU where, again, trans folks have felt marginalized and like they are not seen as okay. So we have an intersection between being a member of the church, having a spiritual home, and having an identity, a gender identity that's different than the norm, than what we have been told this is the way and this is the path. The statement that's made in the church manual or handbook is that gender is determined by the sex assigned at birth, and that it's eternal and part of your eternal mission and purpose and all of those things. So as you can imagine, that makes a hard intersection for these people who are already feeling marginalized in society and trying to navigate their relationship with the church. It also can be hard for parents. So I'm going to turn the time over to Quintin for a bit to talk more about this research project.
Thank you. Yeah, Julia gave a great introduction to why this research project kind of came about. I'll just talk a little bit about more what we're doing and some specifics here. So the Trans Mormon research project, and we use asterisks, as Julia pointed out with trans, because we're being expansive to include all aspects of gender nonconformity and gender queerness. We have the same approach with Mormon, because we're not just interested in active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are also interested in the experiences of folks that were raised LDS and have left, or grew up in a home highly influenced by LDS culture and doctrine and teachings. Oh dear, okay. So how it came about. I was working on a large project about suicide prevention, and we noticed that about a third of the kids that were coming in, this is not specifically targeting queer kids, but we noticed about a third of the kids coming into our trial were queer, and about 6 of 120 were transgender. Kids dealing with extreme suicidality and extreme conflict with their parents. And I was put in this kind of conundrum of, here I am, this little Mormon kid trying to be a therapist and trying to save lives. And if I really care about saving lives, how can I not care about a group of people that are at such high risk of suicide? If I really believe that life is precious, and I really believe that every life is precious to our heavenly parents, I felt very strongly compelled that I needed to do more to understand our Heavenly Father's children that may have the hardest time feeling like they fit in, may have the hardest time feeling accepted within a culture that is part of their identity. So that is how I connected suicide prevention into suicide prevention, understanding the trans experience within the LDS framework. The purpose of the project is really to understand, 1, what is it like to be transgender and Mormon? And 2, what's it like to have a family member be transgender and Mormon? Within this, we're all encompassing of what's the experience like and what helps you what supports you, what helps you to communicate to your child that you love them. One of the things that we're starting to develop is how can you as a parent or a family member, a sibling, or even a friend give a message that is this is really hard. How do you give a message that is impossible to misunderstand, that I love you and I care about you and I accept you? Because as Julia mentioned, the more stress and the more minority stress that a person experiences, the harder it is to feel accepted and to feel loved. So in face of all of that additional stress that folks are experiencing, it's really hard to feel loved when people are trying to support you. So how can we do this best? So how does it matter? And why does this matter? This matters because knowing how to foster love, connection, and support in some of the most challenging situations can inform us, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, therapists, members of the world, fellow human beings. This can inform us how to foster love, connection, and support in all situations. If we can understand how to help somebody in an extreme situation, we can understand how to do it in all situations. So a little bit about the progress that we've done so far. Yeah, sorry, a little backwards here. So far we've interviewed 73 participants. A little bit more than half have been trans folks. Just under half are parents of trans folks, and then some siblings, partners, one child of a person that came out as trans as I say older adult with children in their 30s. So where we're going from here is we're really trying to capture all of the experiences of what it's like. We probably are trying to target more gender queer folks rather than folks that are transgender but fit in the binary. We also are trying to understand experiences of people that have been disconnected from their family and reconciled, to really understand what's that like. The majority of the participants that we've interviewed have never been rejected by a family member. But unfortunately, one thing that we do know is that trans kids are at higher risk of being rejected by their family members, meaning often dealing with issues of homelessness or even family violence. And we're going to be using this to build theory about what helps parents to accept and help their kid feel loved. Conversely, what's helping a trans kid feel loved? And then our last future direction, what we're working on now, is that we're trying to develop a survey and a longitudinal project to study trans families over time and see how issues are developing and changing. Not just a brief snapshot of what are the challenges right now, but what's it like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? This is data that we don't have about the trans experience in general, and we have even less about it within trans LDS families and trans Mormon families. All right, Julie.
So this research that I'm going to share right now is initial research. It involves, let me pull it up. Let's see here, 18 parents that were interviewed as part of this study, as well as a couple of interviews from a podcast called Listen, Learn, and Love. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's a great podcast if you'd like to learn more. And then also, as a mother of a trans child, I am part of some Facebook groups that are like LDS parents of either just queer or particularly trans kids. And so some of the data comes from that also. There's like 200 pages of coded transcripts and lots and lots of hours of interviews. So in doing this research, in doing any kind of qualitative research, you have to be aware of what you're bringing to the table, any potential biases, just being reflective of yourself. And so some of the assumptions that I want to make clear I started with were that supporting and accepting a transgender family member is in the best interest of the child, it's in the best interest of the family and of society, and that it is morally justifiable and not in conflict with the gospel. So that was an assumption I started with. Also, I started with the assumption that my own experiences, because I had been previously trained in this issue and was a trained marriage and family therapist, my experiences would not be like everybody else's. And so I tried to go in with an open mind and not assume that everybody would look like me. And I also made the assumption that a lot of LDS parents are not very affirming or accepting of their trans kids, either denying that identity or kicking them out of the house to avoid contamination of their other kids. I've heard a lot. But one of the lovely things that we found in doing the research, and I'll talk for a second in a minute about this, was that the vast majority of the parents that we interviewed were very affirming and loving of their kids. We're not kicking their kids out. We're trying to engage in this process with their kids. So one of the future directions that we're doing in theoretical sampling is finding parents who are still not feeling comfortable affirming their kids, because we want to understand their experience, what's going on for them, what might help in that process. And so part of the reason we got the parents that we did might have just been those were the parents who are willing to talk about it, and parents who are feeling shame or who are like in denial don't want to talk about it. Okay. So themes that came up in this research. In a minute, I'll show you kind of a visual that I created with this theory or whatever about the process that parents go through, but I'm going to go over the themes first. So the first one is the relationship. It was really important to the parents that we interviewed to have a relationship with their child. That felt like part of their identity as a parent, to be like connected to their child and to help their kid in whatever ways their kid needs help. So some of the quotes from parents were, when my child came out to me, I felt really scared. I thought if something could come between us, it would be her thinking that I couldn't accept her. Another was, the battle wasn't between whether she's transgender or whether she's not. The battle was keeping her alive. It's like, I want to continue this relationship. I want to support my kid, however that looks. This wasn't anything, that my kid asked for. It was real. I could believe him because I knew his character. So that's, again, looking at the relationship that the parent already has with the kid. They know this child. They know the person, and so they trust. Another one was, as my child has come out and as we have gone through this with her, I feel like I understand her better, so our relationship is better. So that theme of relationship was really key, both to moving the process forward and also as the parents were affirming and loving and helpful to their kids, they saw that relationship become stronger, and so it was an outcome also. Then we think of like categories of our lives or like areas of our lives, and all of those came up in this research as being part of the process that parents went through in coming to accept a trans kid. So emotional, cognitive, social, and spiritual. At the beginning, this was a hard thing for a lot of parents to wrap their brains around and to deal with emotionally. So parents said, for example, I let my anger just try to push him to do things. I tried to shut down what he was feeling. Another said, I feel like I'm mourning the loss of my child. Even though I love them so much and am proud of them, why am I so sad? I feel like I'm failing them by being sad. Another parent said, what my child was deciding hurt me on a deep level, that she was giving up something I held so deeply and so strongly valued, which was fatherhood. This was from the father of a trans girl who had been assigned male at birth. So there was a lot of emotions for parents to sort through and figure out, a lot of grief. I think every parent that I talked to experienced different kinds of grief. And then some of the process of acceptance, maybe we hear about steps of grieving and acceptance, like denial, anger, all of those things were coming up for parents too. Cognitively, it was often hard for parents. So they said, my kid said this to me. I had no idea what that even meant. One said, it was very, very difficult to understand the non-binary thing for me. It was new vocabulary and something we hadn't seen in my generation. Another parent said, in that week that my child came out, not only did we talk to a counselor, but we started researching. Another said, I understand it better after hearing other people's stories and explanations, knowing more about beyond genetics, there's hormones and brain chemistry that can affect all of that. So parents were really struggling to wrap their brains around what was happening. What did this mean about their child? What did it mean in general? So there was a big cognitive component of this process. Spiritually, like we talked about, this is an intersection between identities. Identity as a parent, hopefully a good parent, and identity as a member of the church, and kind of subscribing to the beliefs that the church holds, which sometimes are not affirming to a trans identity. So one mom said, it's soul splitting, having this child and then your religious side of you. Another said, we just put some religious teachings on a shelf for now and keep moving forward. And I heard that from a lot of parents too. I don't know. I don't know how to know. I know I need to love my kid and believe in them. And I also know that I have a testimony of this church. And so I don't know how that intersection works. So I'm putting things on the shelf. Another mom said, I just got this impression that keeping my child safe and alive was number one priority to Heavenly Father. And I'm like, okay, Heavenly Father, I hear ya. Let's do this. And then another said that something has been helpful to them in the process was focusing on the core of the gospel, meaning that core of love, the core of seeing others as part of yourself, of ministering to people who are marginalized. Socially, there's a lot of different aspects of this. There's kind of this halo effect when a kid is marginalized, it reflects on the parents. And so parents talked about how that felt for them. One said, it's hard when it feels like part of your family is rejected. Another said, I feel like we're a family in the foyer now. We aren't in the chapel anymore. We don't fit in. We're just kind of on the outside looking in. Another said, there are a few different aspects to the abandonment that they had felt. Like her family, she felt like her family basically condemned her for supporting her child and didn't want to have a relationship with the child or with her anymore. And then they also had positive social experiences. One mom talked about how, or a parent, I don't know, they weren't all moms, there were dads in here too. The bishop kept saying over and over, let him dress how he wants, we just want him here. So that was an experience of acceptance that was helpful. Okay, so this is the process graphic that I created. Oh, maybe I will use this. Okay, so we see over here, these are the pre-process conditions, what was going on for parents before their kid came out. And that what I saw in these interviews was that what was going on previously impacted parents' process. So there were some emotional things like how they perceived the child. If they trusted the child, they thought, this is a good kid. I know this kid. I love this kid. Then that impacted how they would trust what the kid was saying. Then cognitively, what did they think of the queer community? Did they know anything about a trans experience? If they did know something, was it positive or negative? What had they heard? Then spiritually, the quality of religiosity. Had there been other experiences that had helped them kind of be expansive, be nuanced in their religious beliefs, or did they have a really black and white kind of religious perception? Social, were they surrounded by people who would be affirming to them? Did they have a good support system? Or did they not? And then the relationship here. So like what was going into this relationship that they had? Was there emotional energy? Did they have a support system? Did they have access to resources? All of those things. So coming out, and a lot of parents actually stayed in this space for a long time. depending on the parents we interviewed, some of them it was like years. They were spending years before they used a different name and pronouns, before they moved out of denial. And they're like, okay, apparently it's not a phase. Some parents, it was like 5 minutes. And they were like, okay, apparently we're doing this. Now let's move forward. But there was like that initial stuff. There's a lot of emotional, a lot of grief. You can see there. So like shock, like I don't, how can this be? Avoidance, like I'm just not going to talk to the kid. We're going to pretend it didn't happen. Denial, this is just a phase that's happening. There's anger. Cognitively, there's like, I don't know, I don't understand. Once parents made the decision to move into this, okay, we're going to really step into this process. There continued to be challenges in all of these areas. Under emotional, ambiguous loss means a loss where it's not really clear what has been lost. So, for example, a lot of parents talk about, I feel like I lost my child. Like, I lost them. But the child is still there, and they look the same as they did yesterday. And so it's like, how do I say I lost them? And then on the other hand, it could be like, well, my child is here, but I lost important components of their identity. It can also be disenfranchised grief. So disenfranchised grief means grief that's not known or accepted or validated by people around you. Like if you lose somebody that you love, like they die, you will probably tell people and they'll bring you casseroles, right? Like they're there to support you. But with this, a lot of times parents weren't telling anybody, even other members of the family, to protect the child's privacy. Maybe the child wasn't ready to come out. So they had all of this grief and all of this stuff going on, but it wasn't seen. In fact, one of the moms said, like, this isn't the thing that people give you casseroles for. In my own experience, I felt like we suddenly became the problem family in the ward. You know, like people were super nice once they found out, but it felt odd and off. So that's part of that emotional experience. Cognitively, there's a lot to learn. A lot of parents just like dive in, okay, like, is this really a phase? How, like, don't a lot of kids detransition? How can they really know? Is this just cultural? There's so many questions parents have, so they start researching. And socially, again, like we talked about, there can be experiences of rejection, of abandonment, finding new social spheres in which there is maybe some support for parents as well as for kids. And then spiritually, especially if the parent's faith was more like clear-cut and black and white instead of nuanced, this could create a crisis. Like, how can I both believe that this child who I know and love and trust is telling me about their experience and believe their experience, and believe what's being said over the pulpit, which is like, this gender confusion is of the devil. Like, I know my kid's not of the devil, but an apostle just said that. Like, how do I manage this? So it can create crises and transformations. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. The end, which a lot of the parents that we interviewed hadn't gotten to yet, but some of them had. So in doing this research, my hope and my assumption is that a lot of parents will get to this state of acceptance. And acceptance, as I was conceptualizing it in this research, means like peace. It means we've made the changes. It feels emotionally settled. You can see there's new frameworks, new understandings cognitively. There's resolution. It's okay to have a space that I don't know everything. You know, we all have those spaces anyway. But there's also a reinforcement of some of the foundational beliefs like love and faith in Jesus Christ and things like that. And then socially, the child's new identity is established. One of the moms who had reached this point said, you know, there was a lot. It was a lot of process. But at this point, she's just another daughter. Like that's just where we are. She's just another daughter. And that was lovely. And then also a lot of parents start to turn around and be a resource for other parents and to be advocates. So the last part that I want to share, and then I'm going to have Quintin have a chance to share about this too, is just about the transformations that I saw. So this process really was an invitation to parents. We think about how easy it is maybe in our human minds to think of like us and them and how easy that distinction is to make. We are good, we are safe, they are other, they're unknown, they're dangerous. In fact, in one of the lessons I taught in church recently, it was about how to protect yourself from the world. And I thought, what is the world? Like, is that like all the evil people outside of the church? But the people outside of the church aren't evil. But it's so easy to fall into that kind of black and white view. And one of the things that having a transgender or a queer child does is brings this other into your family and into your heart. And it's like, wait a second, it's not other. This is somebody that I know. And that, I think, is an invitation to transform, to find faith and connection instead of fear, to learn to be more nuanced. And so many of these parents said, I'll read some of their quotes. They said, they talked about how they had learned to love. So one parent said, it can be beautiful and fulfilling and full of love, this experience of being queer and of having a queer member of the family. There is more out there than just the heteronormative family. Another said, LGBTQ folks were put on this earth to test the rest of us, to see if we could be Christ-like and love unconditionally. We are the ones that need to change. And another said, we have loved our journey with our trans child because I've really learned how to love. The journey that these LGBTQ folks are on is manifesting God's love through them. And parents also talked about moving from that kind of black and white understanding to a more nuanced perspective and how that just opened their hearts. I have been really grateful for the transformation and the invitation to growth that I have had as a mom of a trans kid, and that has made in our family. For my husband and my husband is also supportive, which I'm so grateful for. But it's really allowed us to see things new and to practice the gospel of Jesus Christ and what's at the heart of that gospel in new ways. I'm so grateful for that. I'll turn it over to Quintin.
Yeah, really the thing that I would just like to share matches very well what Julia just said, is that doing this research has been transformative to me as a therapist, transformative to me as a person, transformative to me as a father, as a parent, as a partner, and as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint. And I would even include as a child of God. Because I have learned what it means to love. I have learned something that was very profound, just how precious everyone's life is to our Creator. And that every part of our being, whether it's the parts of my body that I'm not happy with, that I'm a little too short, I don't like the way my voice sounds, I don't like the way my body looks, I don't like my gender, I don't like my gender expression, every part of who we are is an aspect of divinity, a way in which we are created in God's image. And that is beautiful. And that is something that has very much deepened my understanding of what the gospel of Jesus Christ is. And this is Thank you. Sweet.
By studying the unique process of learning to accept a transgender child within a religious context, Dr. Hunt and Ms. Bernard's research helps us to better understand the ways we can support and love the people in our lives. Although it can be difficult to find a balance between the teachings of the church and acceptance of a loved one who has come out as transgender, this presentation demonstrates to us that it is not only possible, but essential. When we are willing to be motivated by love, we allow ourselves to have richer, deeper, and more fulfilling connections and relationships. As we know from our studies in the GWS minor, gender can be an important part of someone's identity. When someone's internal gender identity and the body they were born into do not seem compatible, this can cause a lot of challenges. Transgender and gender nonconforming people have some of the highest rates of mental health difficulties of marginalized groups. A key factor in determining mental health outcomes is family acceptance and support. How we treat others matters, especially when those we love are at their most vulnerable. Transitioning can be a difficult and transformative process, not only for the person transitioning, but for their loved ones as well. It requires humility and acceptance from everyone involved as relationships are reestablished, perspectives are reevaluated, and identities are reintroduced. This presentation enables us to see the power that comes from completely and unconditionally loving and supporting the people that mean the most to us. Through transition and transformation, we can come to better understand ourselves, our loved ones, as well as our faith. Finding nuance in our beliefs can help us see that there is power in inclusion and strength in diversity. Every person is put into our lives for a reason, and there is something that we can learn from everyone we come into contact with. When we are willing to look past our differences and love fully and entirely, we not only enrich the lives of those around us, we also enable ourselves to grow into who we were meant to be. We can be transformed into more compassionate, caring, and thoughtful people. Thanks for coming to speak to us.
Okay, so for the next few minutes, we're going to have the Q&A portion. If you are here and have a question, you can line up behind this microphone and ask. If you are on Zoom, keep submitting your questions. Grace is monitoring the chat, and so she will ask those questions. And to start off with, I will just start with a question. Either through your research or experience, what have you learned is the best way to respond to someone who either doesn't understand or support someone who is transgender?
Okay, so one of the things that I've learned is that that like love and compassion has to be for everybody. So if somebody comes in and is like, I don't want to support this, or I don't, they deserve love and compassion too. So I would probably respond by asking about their concerns and find out maybe what is adding to that perspective. Maybe sharing some of my personal experience.
Yeah, I would just say that I think that's a no-win situation where you're not going to logically convince somebody that they're wrong. And honestly, I mean, especially if this is like somebody that has, let's say, like a doctrinal question, they don't believe that transgender exists, or how does this reconcile with the family proclamation? The best answer I have is I don't know all of these things, but I do know that this person, whomever it is, does not feel supported and does not feel loved, and they're actually the only person that can possibly know if they are trans or they are gay or whatever that is. No other person has the stewardship over their body to know that. But it is within my stewardship to love this person and to help them feel loved and to support them. That is one of the great commandments that God gave us, and that's the answer that I give. Is I really don't. I try not to engage in questions like that, and just default to how can I help someone feel loved. Yeah. Do you want us standing up here for questions to answer them? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so on the chat, a couple people have asked if you have received any pushback from BYU or the church for this research, or in what ways you're sharing the research with BYU or the church as a whole.
I mean, I would love to share our research with the church as a whole or church administration. Hasn't happened yet. I mean, that's probably the biggest reason is because I'm a bad researcher and haven't published much. We are bad researchers and haven't published much. As far as pushback, it was really difficult to get approval to do this research. Not because of the complexities of the situation, specifically studying transgender issues and LDS, but some of the concerns that the IRB had about protection of vulnerable populations. So for example, I really wanted to study youth living at home, but that's not something that we've been able to do. So that's the biggest pushback that we've had, which that would also exist other places. And I will just be clear, I am not an authority figure in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but when I interviewed for my job here, I was very clear that I was going to be doing this research. And at every level of administration at BYU and the general authority interview that I had, I was told this is important research and we need to do this. That's has been my experience, and I think that's all I can say about that.
I was also going to say, didn't you talk to the person who was at, like, we sent Morgan's thesis to?
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I don't
remember.
there was somebody in church administration that we have exchanged some information with. We can't recall.
Well, is the person who's in charge
Yeah.
of all the, like, life help section of
Yeah.
the website. She was that.
Question?
Okay.
Oh, do you want
Oh.
to do
Is
it?
it this or that?
I think it's that one. Yeah.
Cool.
So I was wondering how you found participants for the study, and if any parents just straight up refused to participate if their children were, willing. Yeah.
So I think a lot of the parent participants came because, like, I'm part of those Facebook groups where there's a lot of parents of trans kids, and so I just posted, like, we would love to talk to you and hear about your experiences, and they came for that. For the trans kids, I don't know, you did more of that, I think.
I honestly don't. I mean, we made like 2 or 3 social media posts, and then a couple of students did, and
Were like into groups or
I'll-
into your personal?
great question. I
Facebook?
I would share them, or I would tweet it out on my personal Twitter or my personal Facebook or my Instagram. I think that's all the social media folks that people use these days, the big ones. And then people would share it on their own, and from there, too many people that I could ever respond to their emails emailed me. So that's what we've done, which was very low effort on our part.
Okay.
But
Yeah, and then to your other question, I don't think anybody, we didn't ask specific
Correct.
people, so
Okay.
nobody was, like, put in a position where they would refuse, but we did definitely have to seek out less affirming or non-affirming parents. Yeah.
yeah, and I will just say that, yeah, I think a lot of people, they're all self-selecting in, so they're not even responding if they're not interested. Yep.
So I have 2 quick questions. The data that you showed said that approximately 1 in every 200 people identified as genderqueer or trans in some way. Was that number specifically for LDS members or people who have grown up in the church and been a part of that culture, or is that in general the statistic?
So that was in general. There have been research, or there has been research that looks particularly at the LDS population. It's inconclusive, and it's been, like, debated. That research that was done looked like it was a higher number in the church, but that's still a little bit up in the air.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was also a study that was published last year of all BYU students were asked about their sexuality and sexual orientation and gender identity, and responded, and it was similar to the national averages. So,
I see. And then are you continuing this research, and are you still looking for participants? Like,
Yes.
okay. Got it. Thank you. And wait, how would we go about like connecting people with you?
The best way is to email me
Okay.
or talk to me. Yeah.
They could email me too. I'm doing interviews.
Julia's a little bit better at responding to email, but it's my project.
Yeah.
So either one of us, really. She's also doing it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So my question just pertains to transitioning. So did most of the trans people that you interviewed, had they transitioned, or was there kind of a mixed group? And then also I was wondering, did parents' reactions change depending on whether or not their kids wanted to transition or were transitioning?
So I think that I can better answer the transitioning one. It's a mix. I would say definitely the folks, about half of the trans folks that we interviewed are like consider themselves part of the church. Most of these folks have not been transitioning much. Most of the folks, I might even say all, but I would have to look at the data. But I'm willing to say almost all of the trans folks that have left the church have transitioned. Not everybody medically, because there's a lot of reasons why people do or do not have surgery, but socially, yes. As far as the parental acceptance,
So for parents, often it was like the process kind of grew as the kid transitioned. So it's like, okay, maybe I can accept that you identify as trans or non-binary, but then it's another process to, now we're going to use your name, preferred name and pronouns, and then another process of like, okay, you're actually going to take hormones. Okay, I've got it like work. So like each piece of the transition seemed to be another like part of the process for parents.
Cool. Thank you.
I'll ask one from Zoom. A few people have been wanting to know your thoughts on anti-trans executive orders in Texas, and if you'd like to share about that. A very broad question, but if you.
Yeah, that definitely went around some of the Facebook groups that I'm part of. I mean, the hope is that it won't become law. It's painful. Like for parents, it's really painful to be told, like, especially if your kid is suicidal and self-harming and like you are doing whatever you can to keep them alive, and you're told you are a child abuser because you're letting them transition. Like that's just, you're hit from all. It's painful. But yeah, close family members or extended family members in my family, when my child came out, said the same thing. So it's like, it's been around, it's been heard, and it's painful.
the only thing I will say to that is, yeah, I think if somebody is forcing a kid or anybody to transition, I'm comfortable calling somebody that's forcing a kid to transition child abuse. I'm very comfortable calling that child abuse. If you're forcing a kid that does not want to. That is almost never what's happening. Almost never. I mean, is it possible? I'm sure it's possible because anything in this world is possible, but I know of no documented instance where that's happened. But I don't think I think this law is not, or the executive order is trying to fix something that I don't think is actually happening.
So you mentioned in your research the importance as a therapist of offering these services to transgender individuals. And so I'm curious if you know anything about, and also just want to hear your thoughts on the BYU clinic preventing or stopping giving services to these individuals, and how you square your research with these institutions that continue to marginalize LGBTQ individuals.
You want to start with that, or do you want me to?
Good, you start about that.
So the day that I heard about that, I had to take deep breaths and went immediately. That's the clinic that we work out of. It's a different department, but I went and talked to the director of communications disorder whatever. And it was really good to talk to him. The whole department did not want to. They were all about inclusion, and they wanted to be doing this and teaching. And that was hopeful to me. I know all of the other departments in the building also were like, what? No, we can't. So like more has come out since then. Services are not being denied because someone is trans. I think whoever in the administration of BYU decided that it was because it was transitioning rather than because the person was trans. It's still one of those things, you know? Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I will just say, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I don't know enough information to really answer the question well, other than it certainly has impacted a lot of people. I don't know, I guess I don't think I have enough information about administration to say that what was happening or beyond there. But the other thing that I will say is, this is one of the blessings of BYU, is that some of the things that cause, well, especially queer folks, but trans folks to feel discriminated against are a little more out in the open. Not that it's good that you're having this discrimination, but discrimination happens everywhere. My gay sister, the most extreme discrimination and violence that she experienced was in San Francisco, which is supposed to be one of the most accepting cities. I've seen more discrimination against queer students at the University of Minnesota, which is a very liberal university that dedicates itself to be affirming to students, but it's hidden, and so then people don't believe it when students are talking about it. I'm not saying that it's better for it to be out in the open, but if it's out in the open, it's easier to talk about because people are more likely to believe it. It's still difficult. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have, unless do we want to do any more questions? Good. Okay. Thank you so much. Just give them one more round of applause.